This next presentation is entitled Dragon Age Inquisition, Rising to the Challenge of External Development. Dragon Age Inquisition has been a commercial and critical success, winning over 100 awards, including Game of the Year. What sets this presentation apart from the other outsourcing presentations is that it will share lessons learned from an extended development engagement of 3 years. Many of you might notice that there are more and more projects like this. By the end of this presentation, we should walk away learning how EA Bioware and Sperasoft address the various challenges and changes throughout a long-term outsourcing project like this. With this, it's my pleasure to introduce our next presenters. David Lim, the Associate Art Director from Bioware, and Olga Kotyukh, lead character artist from Sperasoft Studios. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our presentation. I don't have a slide for the next one, but I wanted to talk about the environment in which I started and in which we started Dragon Age Inquisition. It was a new engine for the team. It was a new engine for our external team. It was a new position for myself. So there was a lot of learning and a lot of challenges. In terms of the market, Dragon Age 2 wasn't quite the commercial success we wanted it to be. Mass Effect 3, there was obviously some controversy regarding the ending. So for Dragon Age Inquisition, we really needed to hit it out of the park. And hopefully this presentation will show what we did, and I feel it's a celebration, really, of what we've done. Also, with some slides, you'll see it's some therapy as well, so bear with us. So the picture of me and my wife, Dominique, who's a veterinarian. Anyone who knows a veterinarian loves animals and takes them home. So we have 2 cats and a dog. We previously had 2 fish. She has had a bird. We've had multiple things in our house, and we have 3 kids, so it's really busy at our house. I was born in Edmonton and raised in Vancouver. So me moving back 4 years ago almost now was natural, as we have the support structure there of family. And I'm used to the snow, so. And I said that already, EA Black Box for 10 years. So I was previously on SSX, worked with Chris Wren there, Need for Speed. So kind of had a really good sampling of what we did here in Vancouver. And I was looking to expand my role and my responsibilities into something new. And Dragon Age was a great opportunity at that. And I joined as an external art director in January 2012. So the role of an external AD, this is something that, to be honest, I think I starting to fully understand after 3 years of full production on Dragon Age. Number one for me is being the owner of quality. So when people ask me what I do, I generally say I'm the Gordon Ramsay of external development or external art, as in I set the high bar and I try to get everyone else to come with me. And Sperasoft now is making my job a lot easier. So I've been a product owner and project manager over the project, just because we've had multiple project managers. We really didn't have a full-time PM until now, which is great. John Mayhew has joined the team 2 months ago, and we're working on Mass Effect now, along with Sperasoft. But I've had to wear multiple hats, and it's been a great experience. Really, what our job is, in terms of anyone who's involved with external development, is a broker, right? You basically represent the internal team to the external team and vice versa. So it's really important, even though our internal teams are paying our salary, you need to have that balanced view of what is fair and representing both and having a balanced view.
Hi everybody, my name is Olga, and I was born in the beautiful city of Yekaterinburg that is currently known as for Ural Mountains and the border between Europe and Asia. I attended the Ural State Technical University and graduated with a master's degree in industrial design. While there, I worked on games prior to my graduation, and then I moved to St. Petersburg when I worked for 3 years at Russian game development studio, which is currently known as wargaming.net. In August 2010, I joined Sperasoft as a character artist, and currently I'm a lead, and my main responsibilities are determining and setting quality standards for team, researching tools and new techniques to use in production, assess team member skills for task assignments, setting realistic estimates, and interfacing Bioware team for feedback and direction.
So just wanted to give you guys a sample of Sperasoft's contributions for Dragon Age Inquisition. Oh, that's the laser pointer, don't do that. This is a really iconic shot for Dragon Age Inquisition. It's kind of the Last Supper type of image, and you can see Sperasoft's contribution there. These are our advisors. They're key members that help guide you along the way in terms of the plot and the story, and you can see Sperasoft's contribution. Some of these shots, excuse them, are kind of set up a little bit because Dragon Age is a vast world. So and there's props everywhere. But I'm kind of cherry picking our moments here. So not always like this, but this is an example. And similar with this. And similar with this. So the Nug, the baby-like, pig-like creature, is kind of disturbing. You can see a little dragonling, well, not so little, but you can see it in the corner. That's also Sperasoft's work. I know that Neil told me not to call them ghouls. What did we actually call them?
It's corpse.
Corpse. Thank you. Olga sometimes helps me with my English. And this is something that...
Invidiman.
Yes, she remembers. See, we were having this conversation about my memory. And I tend to have a hard drive that lasts about 6 months, and then it erases. So bear with me if I forget some of the names, but this is one of the assets that Olga worked on herself. The Canary, they're a big feature now, a little plug. Trespasser, our DLC, I believe it was released on September 8th, and the Canary are a big part of that DLC, and Sperasoft is a major contribution on that. I say apostates, you say?
Evar.
Just an example of some of the intricacy of the work that Sperasoft has done. When you look at the NPC bodies that they've done, and I'll show you a grand scene of all of them, they all require LODs, and these were all hand done. I think we're investing in some technology now we have that automates some of that process, but it still involves work. So you can see, when you see all the work that we've done, not only are we working on LOD 0, but we're skinning and rigging all these LODs. So it's a big challenge. Confessional. I don't know why I picked that one, but I like it. This one is a statue done by Pasha Gruba. Unfortunately, he's no longer with Sperasoft, but he nailed the concept perfectly, and I really love the execution on this.
He's a really talented artist, by the way.
A book. I just wanted to show an example of some very simple props, but the dedication and the time and the craftsmanship that they take to make some of the work blew me away. Again, some work that Olga has hand-touched. This is one of Matt Goldman, who is the franchise art director. It's one of his favorite props. Very ornate clock, obviously. And I know I keep forgetting, I know Despair Demon.
Yes, exactly.
So the next two slides are, this is the Phoenix, and this is the Lurker. And what's, obviously the work speaks for itself, but I want to show you this next slide. One thing that was different for us, and a new take on how we made ambient creatures, was that we tried to utilize rigs as much as possible. So you can see these three different creatures with which Sperasoft executed on all three. They share the same rig. So what that means is we only did a mesh change, and we added some key animations that interrupted the repetitiveness of identifying that that creature was not unique. So it was a good way of doing more with our budget, and we were able to make a lot more wilderness creatures. So just a quick tally of what they did. 240 plus characters, 58 creatures, and 424 props. 395 animation clips. Sasha Ivanov is an excellent leader on their team, and he's been really great at really understanding Bioware's style, and it shows in the animation clips that they've done. So when we were talking with Su Cheng about what we wanted to do in terms of this presentation, he had some really good feedback in terms of identifying what makes us unique. So the 3 years of development, it was new to me. I haven't really worked on anything that long in terms of full production, maybe a year and a half of tops for me. So this was unique for us, and I think for Sperasoft too, in terms of this length. So one of the benefits is you have time to do it the right way. You have a pipeline that you can say, depending on who you talk to, how developed it is. But at least you have the time to get used to it, have the proper on-ramp, an ability to kind of identify where your partner's strengths are and what they can own. One thing that we really made a concerted effort to do is train our partners on how to solve issues on their own and really set them off in terms of starting to debug art. I remember the first time we had an issue with Frostbite. Frostbite's not working, and I wouldn't get any screenshot or anything like that. It was very challenging at the beginning. But now, I mean, they know exactly what we need to do. One thing I didn't mention regarding the high return on training is that we benefited over a long period of time. So the investment that we made initially, we got to ride, and we continue to as we're using Frostbite on Mass Effect as well. Bandwidth. So that's something that we've been really cognizant of, is trying to make sure that we're not taking on too much, our partners are not taking on too much, and that we're not getting out of control. It's a runaway train at times. When you have a 3-year cycle, you're able to make mistakes and alter them. And luckily, I didn't think there was really I don't remember of any assets that we actually didn't use. I think everything we made, we used in some sort of fashion. Did we course correct and kind of adjust things? There was a big shader change at the end, which kind of hurt. But all in all, I think it was a really big success. So detractions, you have time to second guess yourself a little bit. And I think we did that at times. I guess that shader change is one, but I think it was a good thing. The illusion of time. So, 3 years sounds like a lot, but when you're making as much as we did on Dragon Age, it is not a lot of time. And one thing they were good at identifying when I started this project was identifying the need for my role and trying to find the right person to do that. So my boss was good at hiring me, is what I'm saying. So never feeling ready to start and starting before ready. So, that chicken and egg conversation that you have that, the documentation's almost there. We're just 2 more weeks. And you get to a point where you're just having to start. So there comes a point where you have to just kick the boat off and sail. Go do it. So this is a little bit of a summary in terms of our overall spend for the project. So the purple line there is our overall monthly spend, and the blue line is our spend with Sperasoft. So we wanted to show a little bit of insight in terms of the numbers. Notice we haven't put any figures there. We're being anonymous with that. But you can see overall in terms of how we've been allocating our resources, Sperasoft is a big contributor. You can see at the beginning that there's a bunch of dips. So before when we first tried out this project, we were more contract-based, as in work order-based. So we did assets. So it was an on and off switch, and you can kind of see that at the beginning of the graph there. But as we went further along and we went retainer-based, you can see how it's much flatter, and there's ebbs and flows. And at the very end, every project, there is that, I can't say that word, the O moment. So we have to do a lot of work over a short period of time just to get it all in the suitcase. So dealing with change. I feel like I've touched on before in terms of my role and our role as an external development group is that we need to be the first line of defense and making sure that we're being fair and that we have enough information, we're informing our teams, we're informing our external teams. How reactive is too reactive? So at times, game development is this roller coaster ride. It could be white on Monday and black on Friday. So you have to make sure that you're jumping in the pool at the right time. So sometimes it's almost that 3-day rule of just letting things sit and letting things percolate and then making the action. If you're too reactive, things can change and then you just totally confuse the partnerships that you have. One thing that we really did well was starting the right type of work at the beginning. So we did a type of work called retcon, retroactive continuity, which means we took old assets from DAO and DA2 and modified them to be Frostbite compliant. And it really was a good on-ramping type of exercise for Sperasoft. They got to know the engine. For any new artists, they got to know the style and look of Dragon Age. And really, it was for ourselves because we were learning in parallel. So not only was Sperasoft learning Frostbite, we were too. So documentation, the bane of documentation. I think it's always a challenge to make sure that it is up to date and that at any point you can throw it to anyone else and they'll understand it and know what to do. It's always a challenge of keeping that up to date and getting in the minds of the leads that you're working with to say, hey, I'm glad you told me about that change. I will add that to the documentation. I've also worked on projects in which the brief is over 100 pages long. And when you're working with partners and you toss them the Bible, I don't think that's going to go over too well. So things can get missed. If it's just too much information all at one time. So we try to make them as brief and as accurate as we possibly can. So the expectations are understood, the deliverables are understood, and the look and feeling of what we're trying to get after is understood. The same thing regarding edge case scenarios. You can get into the weeds, so we try to stay away from that. So one thing that we have that's unique to EA is a group called XDI, External Development Intelligence. And they help us navigate the waters in terms of rates and any changes that are happening at our partners from a global level. So it's a real benefit to us because when you're in full production, you don't have time to look at it from that view. Waterfall development with agile capabilities. I find that when we are doing things externally, the best is the waterfall style for us. The urgency, we can prioritize assets. We don't interrupt the flow of the work. Once we start getting more agile, any efficiencies that you have in terms of knowing what's coming and being able to anticipate that work gets lost. Another practice that we did was being able to evaluate the ramp. So making sure that we have the right people for the work. And that changed quite frequently, actually, on Dragon Age. So every 3 months, myself, Matt Goldman, JC, John Campbell, who's the external producer, we'd sit in a room and say, this is what our next 6 months is looking like. Is it reflective of where the project is going? And we course corrected as we went. Some of the major ones was just making sure that we had enough people so we would get more money and extend our development.
So at Sperasoft, we are always making sure that we are ready for the changes and growing needs of our clients. So we do this by keeping current on emerging software and our development techniques to improve our workflow. For example, some of our artists devote their spare time surfing forums and professional sites to stay on the ball. For example, we have recently introduced Quixel Suite, which has allowed us to improve our texture creation time about more than 50%. Ensuring internal alignment of the team by documenting best practices, common issues, and unwritten knowledge. During 3 years working on Dragon Age, the assets became better and better, and we added more details for higher res meshes and for classes and armor. So we understood that we need more time than we had on hand. And it was considered to categorize assets on gold, silver, and bronze standards. So we spent more time for main characters and less for secondary. One issue that is often overlooked is vacation and sick days. At Sperasoft, we keep cover artists around to fill in for artists during this time. It ensures us that we stay on schedule as much as possible.
So initial challenges for us. The Gen 4 demand for content. So one analogy or very measurable thing for Dragon Age Inquisition is if you take a level from Dragon Age Origins and put it within one of our levels, there is enough room, as in one level from DAO fits within one zone of Dragon Age Inquisition. And there are 7 zones to our open world-like world. So, 7 times, right? So we have to figure out, well, what does that mean in terms of prop density, in terms of the expectation of the player? It was huge. Trust. So when I started, I had to really get to know Olga and the team. With all our partners, we had to make sure that they understood why we were giving feedback, what the intention was, what our goals and desires as a project were, and really understanding how they work too. What worked well in terms of feedback, and to get the results that we needed. That undefined role of art director, that's something that I touched base upon on the first part of the presentation. This role hadn't been done before. So it was kind of a push and pull with the project manager I was working with, JC, the external producer, of where my domain lies. And how I like to work is, you need to have core competencies, but you also need to have these gray areas in which whoever you're working with overlaps with. So you guys can, if someone goes on holiday, you're able to kind of cover and make do. So I think that's really important. Again, the length 3-year development cycle is a definite challenge. And we had high expectations in terms of this is Frostbite. It's you don't want to misrepresent this engine. You want to show it off and show it off well. Frostbite, again, it was a real challenge to get that up and running, and also in terms of understanding how to set up the technology so that our partners could utilize it to its maximum benefit. So when we first started, we had Sperasoft in their own branch, and that slowly crumbled, I remember. About 3 months into it, Dave Mergelli, who was the engineer who was helping to support it, it's like this intricate web that he had to pull things out of, and it just kind of collapsed. So we just, at the end of the day, said, okay, we're going full integrated. 3DS Max, I hate to start any type of wars out there, people fighting in the audience, but Max versus Maya, I'm a Maya guy, so 3DS Max was a difficult challenge for me. So this was an idea of what I wanted as my ideal scenario of external development. as an approver. So, I'm Batman in my cave. I flick the switch, and we're good. At times, it kind of felt more like this. So what we did to get there? Standardization of how, is it good? What is it? It's okay. That's not really good feedback. So we need to make sure that everyone, whoever we're working with, understands what they need to do, what they need to do next. So we provided 4 gates: approved, approved of revisions, revision required, and failed validation. So approved is self-explanatory. With revisions means go to the next stage, so I want you to continue. I don't need to see it again. Revision required, I need to see it at this gate again, please resubmit it. And then failed validation means, uh-oh, this is going sideways, please have a look. So documentation. Making sure that we have a format that is congruent amongst all the types of work that we were doing. So we were doing props, we were doing characters. I wanted to make sure that everything was in a certain template, and that once you knew one, you knew the others. We're trying to again, the challenge of keeping that document up to date, and there is no campfire talk. And when there is, I try to get in the middle of it and listen, and then write it down. Really difficult is always trying to make sure that we're doing it the right way internally before we do it externally. And at times when you're working in parallel, it becomes a definite challenge. But I think that we're slowly learning. So when I was giving feedback, or when I still am giving feedback, the best way I find is visual as well as written down. So we had a forum here, and we have positive and negative GIFs on our forum. We had a lot of fun there, actually. So this was our vBulletin forum. I think it was Bioware Austin who first adopted this. And we took it on, and it worked really well in terms of our communication back and forth. And you can see you can embed these GIFs right into the forum. So it was a very good communication tool. Another thing that we did was set up a test level. So all the assets that Sperasoft worked on, we put into this level, and it was a great way to evaluate our factions. So our factions are different groups of factions, different groups of people that we have in our game, and you're able to kind of see within that faction how are the maps set up, does anything stand out, but also see how they compare to other factions. So it was a great way of just kind of seeing our overall, you could do the kind of blurry test of just staring at this and then seeing, oh, this color pops out, or this smoothness map needs to be fixed. So it was a really good tool. And also, for anyone who wasn't part of the development and wanted to see a quick snapshot of what our external partners were working on, they could load this up and have a look. And again, you can see those errors, purple and pink and yellow skins were not in the final game. But those are some benefits you can see right away. The skin shader's broken on those. That guy's naked. Those things. One thing that we tried to do is, we had such great success with Sperasoft, is we tried to attempt to find partners in which we could do the same thing, replicate it. And that's what we're doing now in terms of our outlook for Mass Effect. Is we want to make sure that all our partners are integrated and they're able to deliver an engine. Same thing with Perforce. It's kind of a logical thing. I think that was one of the first big steps that we did, was making Perforce access. We were doing FTP, I think, when we started.
Yeah, we started with FTP.
Oh, what good looks like. So that's really important. Again, with our documentation and with assets that we've completed, is making sure that everyone understood what the visual target was. Quality and technical requirements for these assets are really important, and Sperasoft hit it out of the park, really. One thing that's a benefit of having one person who's delivering feedback is that the only person who can contradict himself is myself, if that makes any sense. So when you have multiple people, there will be some slight variances in how they give feedback and what they look for, what their preferences are. So having me as the as the one voice, I think really keeps things consistent and really makes it a lot easier for our partners.
Sperasoft, at the beginning on our way on Dragon Age Inquisition, we faced several challenges. We had no experience to work with Frostbite. Nevertheless, we were provided some information from Bioware. To be precise, documentation and short video tutorials. Also, kickoff trip of 2 of our artists to Bioware, Edmonton, was really helpful. The second challenge that we faced with was a new texturing workflow. So having worked at Dragon Age 2, we added a lot of lighting and cavities into diffuse textures, and it was pretty tricky to pass it up and leave only color and texture information. For some of our artists, it was something like how to learn how to walk again, especially for those who had old school experience behind. Completely new for part of our team was working with Perforce. And compared Dragon Age 2, assets became more complex design-wise. And they demanded more attention for details. When working on such a significant project like Dragon Age Inquisition, it's really important to provide artists with necessary information. First of all, they need documentation and well-developed pipeline to be fully involved. Constant communication with Bioware team helps us to move on the right direction, find best solutions. Also, our artists get this information during meetings or via email. And we are active users of library, textures, materials, and photo references, all that helps our artists to understand visual target. At Sperasoft, we don't have distinct division of specialization, so character artist can create props if needed, or animator is able for skinning. Nevertheless, it's very important to understand strong points and preferences of artists on the project. Quite effective scheme of assets checking was developed during 3 years of our cooperation with Bioware. Once an artist finishes one of the stage, high-res or low-res or textures, he walks through checklist. If he do well, he shows his work to a lead. The lead gives him a verbal feedback, and then the model with screenshot are sent to Bioware. It is very important that screenshot includes maximum information, like 3/4 view or front, side, and back view for complex models, UV, wireframe, and polycount for low-res meshes, and geometry with diffuse, smoothness, specular, or tint separately for models in engine. In addition, we really appreciate that Bioware gives us such a great opportunity working with Frostbite. To move on, we get a feedback from Bioware. Usually it's overpaint with a list of improvements. When all work is done, the model is resent for approve. As you can see, the first part, initial checking, is pretty standard, but the second difference, and it all boils down to a client. For example, some of them don't provide engine to final tuning. You need to set up textures in Marmoset or with special created shader in 3D Max or Maya. Sometimes feedback looks like a list of improvements, but without visual part. And it happens that client continues to improve concept when low poly is done. One of the main resources is undoubtedly time, and we try to use it wisely. So new concepts should be required before all work will be done. When artist finishes one of the stage, high res or low res, he can move to the next one. For example, he can create base low poly or prepare some patterns for textures. It will be useful anyway, even if he gets a feedback. Finally, if all work is done, but an artist has some time, he can help his colleague. Moreover, we are always thinking about speeding up our process. We possess some libraries of alphas and brushes. Also, we use kit bash techniques for small similar objects like buckles, rivets, or buttons, etc. We have structure of files which allow every artist to find what he needs on every machine.
As always, keeping the machine, the work full in the hopper is always a challenge, and that is no exception here on Dragon Age Inquisition. The challenge of all this work to review. Sperasoft was doing such a great job, I needed to keep up. Insourcing usurping. So what I mean by that is we had three partners, Sperasoft, EA Shanghai, and OF3D as our partners for Dragon Age Inquisition. And you would think that our internal studio would be the one that would stay with us the longer, would be the safe bet. But unfortunately, Battlefield 4 was on the horizon, and all those resources got pulled. So we had to scramble and make do, but we came out. So team health, obviously with 3 years in development, there's attrition. There is turnover in terms of different positions on the team. Like I said, I think I had 4 project managers over the period. So there was some change. So we had to deal with that and make sure that everyone knew what we wanted to do and that we were growing. I think one thing that was really great, and almost you guys were a victim of your success, is we handled the simple things and we kept on upping the complexity. So you guys are a victim of your own success. I alluded to this a little bit, tech spec scope creep. I can say that really fast. What happened at the end of Dragon Age is we had a major shader change. So all the assets had to get, one of the maps needed to be tweaked. So that was a huge undertaking for us. Wow. This is an example of one of the really big challenges that Sperasoft actually took a lot of ownership on. It really saved us, to be honest. The customization of the Inquisitor, you could be male or female, there was multiple races, and as you can see here, arms, torsos, legs, they could all be interchangeable. So on the next slide, you're going to see a little bit, actually this, if Mikhail is looking at this on the internet, he can see my personal apology to him for his mental health during this time because it was challenging. And what you're going to see next is all the epitome of his work, all the LODs, all the race genders, they all had to be individually exported into the engine, and it was a huge undertaking, and he did it. So I thank you, Michael, wherever you are. Keep an eye at the part count at the bottom. One thing before you click through this one, Olga and myself, we were choosing backgrounds. And this is one that she specifically chose in terms of this title. We tried to make images with every title. And it was very surprising. She said, Rumble in the Bronx right away. So we put Rumble in the Bronx, and then the picture that she chose, look at there's an Asian man being threatened with a knife. What correlation is there?
So, sharing textures. To add diversity to characters, we used a pack of models with sharing textures. As you can see here, are 7 characters, and we use 2 textures for each. One marked as red as a base, and green and blue as a secondary. And the challenge was that on this task worked 6 artists. To avoid mistakes and rework like rebaking and retexturing, we carefully planned UV layout of each model.
Like I said, this is a little bit of therapy for us both.
And the next big challenge was morphing armor. Modeling one morph plus lots for different races and genders takes about 4 or 5 days. But with the help of Bioware, morph creation was particularly optimized. So it takes 2 or 2.5 days. As you can see here, at the beginning we created basic model with the same geometry for various races and gender. Then using morphing modifier and skin wrap modifier in Swedish Studio Max, we morphed different armors, which then were fixed manually.
So big number, for those of you who are metrics fans, 48.6 man-years worth of work was done externally for Dragon Age Inquisition. Wow. So we had visits, Olga mentioned, initial on-site with 2 artists on-site to learn Frostbite. And we had multiple reoccurring visits from us to go visit St. Petersburg. So at peak, 16 Sperasoft artists were committed to DAI, and 12 man-days worth of work in total were awaiting me per day in my inbox. And again, a little therapy here. What made us successful? What I find lucky is that we had the right partners before I started. So it was a matter for me to execute. So I'm thankful for that. Thank you, Neil and Matt and JC. Neil is the studio art director. Matthew Goldman is the franchise art director, and JC I've mentioned. Being able to share and be transparent with our team, I think that's goes without saying. Everyone talks about it, but I think this was, a real good example of, getting integrated and really being able to be honest with each other. I think we have that trust, which is great. On-site visits. Neil Thompson, the studio art director, mentioned he uses the term pressing of the flesh, which sounds a little bit dirty, but I think it's really effective in terms of, I remember one comment that one of the Sperasoft artists made when I first visited was, "You're nothing like you are on the forum," which I don't know what that means. Ownership, as you can see with the examples, especially with that Inquisitor customization, you guys have hit it out of the park and really helped deliver a really great game.
Thank you, David. And at Sperasoft, we feel our keys to success on this project to be building trust with the client through consistently meeting and exceeding expectation, communicating well both internally and externally, creating a working environment that helps our artists feel as a single team, to making sure the team remains passionate and inspired, produce the best quality results.
So what we learned, it's hard when you're working on things in parallel. And we handled the challenge well, but I think we can always do things better with better planning. So that's something that we're trying to do now with Mass Effect going forward. With anything, you have to dip your toe in the water and jump in. So you do your best with the information that you have, and you go forward. As I said before regarding our experience with EA Shanghai, I really love that group and I want to continue working with them, but unfortunately for this instance, it was a real challenge for us in terms of scrambling to find resources. So making sure that you don't have too much reliance on one specific partner. Sperasoft being the exception because they're awesome. Key internal support was really a big win for us. Matthew Goldman, the franchise art director, really believed in external development and championed it throughout the team. And that made my job much less difficult. I think that whenever you have someone who's an advocate for your work, it makes it that much easier. And I know cost, everyone talks about cost regarding external development, but just the sheer volume of the work that we did on Dragon Age, we couldn't have done it without our partners, and especially without Sperasoft.
I sort of learned many things over the course of developing Dragon Age Inquisition. So the key things are take the time to make the most informed decision possible. Plan for and try to keep some buffer time for unforeseen issues. Communication is very important to keep clarity and team synergy. Never be afraid for feedback, because it helps to improve skills. And be open-minded and embrace new tools and process.
So one last thing, I guess. This is a quote that my wife, Dominique, actually had taped in our kitchen. And the gist of it is basically people will forget what you've done and what you've said, but how you made them feel is what's lasting. So I try to take that methodology and that idea with me when I go visit our partners and throughout who I work with. I've traveled to Sperasoft and seen the great architecture. Olga has been a wonderful tour guide when I was there. We've had many adventures. Battled creatures. More just this time in St. Petersburg. Tried different food, and had a great time. Right now, we're getting on the roller coaster again for Mass Effect, and we're looking forward to the ride. So what I want to say, just at the end of the day, and I know that we're running over time here, is that with respect to many of our colleagues, I think that there's more that we share than makes us different. So that's one thing that's been a key takeaway from all my visits. So hence this.